Hey everybody, this is Donna Freeman from Yoga in My School, and this is the Yoga in My School podcast. And I'm so happy that you could be here today with us on a really important topic. We're going to be getting into loss and grief in a few moments. And this is such a huge topic. But before we really get into that, I wanted to send a couple of shout outs to some amazing people who have shared our most recent episode, the one that we went into sensory processing with Britt Collins Feist. And so this was shared on Facebook. We really appreciate these people with Just Breathe Mindfulness Foundation and an Apple a Day Yoga. So thank you so much, you guys, for finding value in the podcast and for letting your communities know about it. Really appreciate that, because it truly is the lifeblood of the podcasting world, is when people decide to share the work and the message. And thank you very much. So this is the Yoga in My School podcast, where we empower you with all things yoga and youth and mindfulness related. And we are getting into, as I said before, the topic of loss and grief. And this topic actually came to my attention yet again, where recently one of my teacher trainees wrote to me, and she said, I was wondering if you have tips on how to help a 7-year-old deal with anxiety after her dad passed away over a year ago, and she is worried that her mom is going to die too. And this wasn't the first time that this type of question has come across my desk. And so I sent her the resources that I had, possible books to help, breathing techniques and mindfulness tools that I knew of. But then I got thinking, I went, there are people out in this wonderful world who have amazing expertise. And if you're not part of this group, you probably want to be part of this group, but the Kids Yoga UK group on Facebook is very active, and their members are so supportive, and a huge shout out. I'm on that group on a regular basis, and I thought, you know what, I bet you there's somebody over here who would be willing to share of their knowledge and their expertise. And lo and behold, you better believe it, we've got Sally Eccleston. Is that how you say this, Sally? Your last name?
Yeah, Sally Eccleston. Yeah.
Eccleston, yeah. Fabulous. And she is an educational psychologist. She is the founder of Yoga with Sally, and she teaches family yoga, kids yoga, adult yoga. She does yoga with all ages, and we're thrilled that she's joined us today to talk about this important topic. Welcome, Sally.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Can you maybe provide some highlights of your professional and personal background to give people kind of an idea of who you are and some of the pivotal moments that have led you to today?
Sure. So I've been working with young people since 2011, and I definitely gained a lot from working in a primary school here in the northwest of England. It was a primary school in a fairly deprived area of Manchester, and I was working with children up to year 6, children with additional needs. And those 2 years that I was working in that school, that really taught me a lot about forming relationships with young people, how group interventions can work, the cultural, ethnic diversity of the school, and how much that can bring to you as a professional. So that was definitely a highlight, and that kind of set me on a path of really being really passionate about education, but also about psychology and what psychology can offer to understanding the development of young people and different populations that we find now in schools. So I was there for 2 years, and I then got a place on a doctoral course training as an educational psychologist. And the year that I finished that program, I decided to do my yoga teacher training. By that point, I had built a personal practice of yoga, and I decided to go to Thailand to train. So that was quite an intensive month-long course. And really from then on, I wanted to blend my interests and my passions. And I'm an avid believer that yoga is for all. It shouldn't be narrow to certain sectors of the population. And I have since then completed trainings with special yoga, also kind of moved around the country a little bit, and I'm now offering yoga to families and also yoga therapy for children with additional needs. So for me, my personal experiences of yoga and mindfulness, and also just kind of the transitions in my life and going with that change, has really brought a lot to me, both personally and professionally, and just trying to kind of offer out what I've managed to learn from a huge range of different teachers and also professionals, from psychologists to yoga teachers. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Fabulous. Thank you. So we're going to get right into this topic, because I know it's a big topic and we could spend lots of time here. But when we're working with students, and maybe we don't know their backgrounds, they don't all come with a dossier that we've, read through. But what would be some of the signs of grief that we could see, some behaviors, and how might they show up differently in different age children? So like, what are we looking, if we're working with preschool children, what might we see with elementary or primary school children, and then maybe with the teenagers, if you want to kind of delve into those?
Yeah, sure. I think it's really important that we understand the developmental stage of a child as well as their chronological age, because when we talk about, say, a 7-year-old or a 14-year-old, it doesn't necessarily mean that their developmental stage necessarily matches their age. That's just an important thing to point out as a starter, because all the information that we offer to young people around grief and bereavement and loss, it's important that it matches where they're at, kind of working with them as an individual. So, kind of starting from preschoolers, 0 to 4 years, they will take a lot of explanation very literally. And also 0 to 4-year-olds can experience what we refer to as magical thinking, which is when they feel that their own wishes or something that they've hoped for has actually changed the reality in their world around them. So younger children are a lot more likely to experience guilt as a result. For example, perhaps if they've had a fallout with someone, or something with a more negative tone has happened before a loss, then they will be much more likely to think that they have perhaps caused a death or been involved in that in some way. And younger children are a lot more likely to act out their feelings through behaviour and play, and they are also much more likely to show curiosity and to ask questions over and over again. So really kind of over that younger age range, there will be lots of questions, there will be confusion, and they may need explanations kind of provided over and over before they really have a true understanding. And as we kind of move up the age range, 5 to 8-year-olds, that sort of developmental age, it's where nightmares may begin. They may see death as something that's a lot more scary, beginning to understand that death is something that is forever, and that people don't come back once they've died. And moving kind of 9 to 12 years, they will start to, those children in that age range, they will have much more vocabulary to be able to express feelings, but they may need to be encouraged to do so. But in terms of risk-taking behaviour, that's really much more prominent in the teenage years. So much more likely to see things like risky behaviour, drug taking, and within the kind of range of 13 to 18 years, you've got this combination of the turmoil and the changes that are already happening in adolescence, plus an unexpected event. So that's much more likely to manifest itself in behaviour that maybe doesn't conform into society. So we can really see some strong patterns in terms of developmental stages and what might manifest. And that there will be some changes, especially coming into the teenage years.
Right. Thank you so much. That's a great, and I love that first note that you said. Okay, chronological age does not meet developmental age, and that's kind of across the board. And we need to really consider that each individual is just that, an individual. So thank you very much.
Exactly.
All right. So what is kind of the most important thing that we can do for a bereaved child?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think there's a lot of myths and some kind of things that parents or professionals might do with really good intentions. The sort of language that we use with young people when we're talking about loss and bereavement. For example, saying that someone has passed and they're now a star up in the sky, or, something that young people actually might misinterpret and take very literally, especially if we're thinking about young people with additional needs, or kind of, as I've just referred to, younger children. And that may actually result in further fear, and not really result in how we want to support them. So in terms of the most important things for bereaved children, it's really important to give them age-appropriate information, and also addressing any fears and anxieties that may come up. So I know that in the example that you've mentioned, that young person is demonstrating a fear of the other parent dying, because one has, and I think it's important to sort of normalize that. And to say that that's a very typical reaction within the kind of 4 to 8 year developmental stage, but to really acknowledge and address that fear for a young person, and to make sure that is heard for them, rather than kind of trying to brush it under the carpet, or say, kind of just saying, oh, well, don't be silly, or don't worry, or, of course I'm not going to die just because mummy has, or whatever the reaction might be. And to really kind of say, well, I can understand why you might feel that way, but actually I'm well and healthy at the minute, and I'm doing everything that I can to stay well and healthy, and I hope to live until an older age. And it's important that children understand that actually death is a natural and inevitable part of life, and we're in this kind of cyclical pattern where everything that is alive does eventually die. So that's the kind of factual and also consistent approach that we want to take when we're conveying that information, that actually we do all die, but that we are taking actions to stay healthy as much as we possibly can. And that's different from telling children that they will never die, or that you yourself will never die. And also that there are some quite unhelpful TV shows or cartoons that children may see, where they see characters coming back from death, and also that that's quite unhelpful in terms of a mismatch between that and reality. So it's important that children begin to understand that death isn't a temporary separation, and that actually if they've lost a very close family member, that family member isn't going to come back. But that doesn't mean that we can't remember them in positive ways, and that we can't have ways within our family of keeping their memory alive. And that's a really important distinction to make, I think, because grief is a process that we all experience at some point. And I think supporting young people with the emotions that come up with grief in a healthy way is a really, really important part of support that you can offer them. So there's opportunities to remember people who have died, really, really important, whether that's through creative activities, whether it's having a memory jar or a memory box, or, you know, maybe writing things that you would have wanted to say to the person who has died, or creating a bracelet or a piece of jewelry where you can have different beads that represent different memories. There's lots of really nice ways of being able to remember people who have died, and loads of amazing resources out there, either via charities or things that you can find online. But I think that the being heard is so important, and reassuring children that they're not to blame for a person's death, and young children feeling that the emotions that they're experiencing have been validated, and, you know, acknowledging that as a parent, or even as a professional, you may be finding the process of grief and bereavement difficult yourself, but modeling, you know, sadness, modeling the expression of emotion, and saying that it's okay to be sad. It's okay for this to be a process that takes time, and building those ways of remembering people who have died as a part of that. I think that's a really healthy framework.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so let's add in this yoga and mindfulness component now. How can these practices be helpful when we're working with loss and grief? And what are some specifics that are things that we can do as, you know, as kids yoga instructors, as parents who have found, you know, relief in our own practices and that type of thing? So how can we make these child appropriate?
Yeah. So starting with mindfulness, you know, just to kind of say a little bit about what mindfulness is, because you can have a yoga practice without it being mindful, or, you know, you can be teaching yoga or practicing yoga without really understanding the true components of mindfulness. So if we understand mindfulness as being present for whatever's going on, with kindness and without judgment, and trying to bring greater awareness to our bodily sensations, our emotions, our thoughts, and being present with those without trying to shut them out. So, you know, I've just touched on kind of the healthy outlet of emotion, and being with that as a parent or a carer, or you know, indeed a teacher or professional of any kind. So I think that the mindfulness practices that are potential and possible during the process of grief are really about connecting to yourself in a way which is going to be grounded, and also experiencing a shift from overwhelm of your thoughts and feelings to maybe, you know, a practice of understanding that you may have these thoughts or you may have these overwhelming feelings, but you don't necessarily have to go with them all the time, or you don't necessarily have to feel overwhelmed by them all the time. It's possible to find the space in between those thoughts. So, for example, one nice, just a simple, you know, breath practice, inviting young people to use their breath as their anchor, inviting them to take their breath into their belly, simply just pausing, taking a moment of space, connecting with their hands over their belly, and then just inviting a sense of curiosity about what comes up from that practice. I think it's really important to go into all mindfulness practices with curiosity, and supporting children to notice how they feel, what they observe, and connecting them back to their bodies in a time at which the thoughts might feel like they're going a million miles an hour. So it's definitely very, very helpful to ground. It's definitely very, very helpful to use the breath as an anchor. And in terms of, the more physical asana, the yoga postures, I think anything with both feet on the ground. I mean, we're talking about very, very simple techniques here. So mountain posture, inviting a young person to feel what it's like in their body to be tall and upright like a mountain, and noticing, just bringing their attention back to their feet, noticing the contact between their feet and the floor, taking the attention down to the ground, in any way that we can offer, really. So some of the other standing postures as well will be really helpful. So the warrior postures, and I think it's really important to approach a young person as an individual. So, for example, faster paced sun salutations for some young people who are feeling anxious, and getting their heart rate up a little bit to get back into their bodies is going to be really, really helpful. Not because we want to distract them from sensations, but as a way of kind of reconnecting them with mind, body, breath, and teaching that as a sequence, understanding how we can move with every inhale and exhale, and kind of it's making sure that they understand their connection to the ground. So maybe getting the heart rate up a little bit, moving through some standing postures, and then coming down, because I think sometimes there's a misconception that we want to take young people who are having a tricky time straight into a relaxation. And sometimes that's helpful, and some young people might be ready to go straight into that, and that's what they need in that moment. But sometimes they're not ready straight away. They're not ready to engage in a body scan or other forms of shavasana or relaxation that we may offer. So I think the connection to the breath, understanding the yoga postures which are going to be appropriate. Most of the time it's going to be with both feet on the ground. It's going to be things like Tadasana, warrior, maybe something, a bridge pose as well is going to be helpful perhaps towards the end of that sequence. And then guiding them into some kind of body scan, moving slowly through different parts of the body, and also adopting mindfulness as an opportunity for a bit of a mind shift. So, noticing the positive events or the positive things that happen for us, to us on a daily basis. But not only the event, an opportunity to notice the sensations that accompany that, what you're feeling in your body, what kind of thoughts you're having, the emotions that brings about. So just encountering that shift from, whether it's anxiety, sadness, overwhelm, to that sense of the things that happen for us in a very routine day-to-day way, and what we can notice about those that's positive and gets us into our body, really.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounded like you were talking about a lot of like root chakra type work, right? Reconnecting, grounding, working on all. You're safe, you're good, be in the present moment, and yes, grieve and remember and honor and celebrate what was, but also to be looking forward and celebrate what is in this moment, and finding the good things about life in this moment. So there's a
Yeah.
lot going on there. That's a hefty order, but I really appreciate all those aspects that you've addressed with your comments today. Thank you so much. All right. So this brings us to, this is some of the things we should do and be looking to do. What might be a few things that would be contraindicated? Like what? It's like, oh, you might not want to quite go there. Watch for these things. If this happens, back off. What are maybe some contraindications?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I guess, when we normally talk about contraindications, it's normally linked with kind of physical conditions or physical limitations, things like asthma or epilepsy or other physical things that young people might be going on. But this is really altogether different scenario, isn't it? So there's not a kind of one size fits all approach. And I think this comes down to really knowing what the individual is ready for. So I think it comes back to the age appropriate information. I think it comes down to the young person's emotional literacy skills, and how best they're going to understand their own feelings and have those validated. And I think in terms of anything that's going to be really, really damaging, it's about the language that you're using, and something which may not have a huge reaction or response from a young person at first, but actually it's kind of their understanding of loss and bereavement and death in the long term will be affected by your language and your approach. And I think sometimes, with the best intention in the world, we think that if we offer out lots and lots and lots of tools or activities or yoga postures for young people, and that can be really supportive. But actually, in this sort of situation, we as the adult, we are the intervention, and how much we are modeling healthy demonstration of emotion, and again, just the use of the language, that's so crucial. I mean, I think if you're focusing on the grounding in terms of yoga and mindfulness, and bringing a young person back to the present, and anything where you've got feet on the floor, using a breath as an anchor, you can't really go too far wrong. You certainly don't want to be doing anything which is going to put more pressure on a young person or create more stress in their nervous system in that present moment, because we know that they're already going to have a lot going on, and the aim is to try and bring their nervous system back into balance. So you certainly don't want to be introducing anything which is significantly new or anything which is significantly physically challenging. You want to be kind of using activities, language around yoga and mindfulness which may already be familiar to them. So it's certainly not the time to be teaching anything drastically new. But like I've said, it's not, you can't really go too far wrong if you've got to focus on being in contact with the ground, understanding age-appropriate language, modelling supportive and emotionally friendly grief behaviour as an adult, which often, I'm making it sound like it's quite straightforward and easy, but of course when you're experiencing grief, it's not, it's not, and you're going to have times when you react, and you're going to have times where you just don't want to get into a difficult conversation with your child or a child about grief in that time, because you're already feeling too much. And I think, it's so important to acknowledge when that's the case. And when you need, as a parent, for example, when you need another supportive adult around, whether that's another family member or whoever else, to maybe take over in that situation. And for children to see that sometimes, you know, mummy's not ready to have this conversation right now, or can she come back to you because you just asked her a really difficult question. I think all of that is really healthy, and sometimes we're scared of doing that because we want to know, we want to provide all the answers, we want to be there for our child and be able to help and be the fixer all the time. So I think there's just, you know, there's little habits that we can watch, and that's true all the time, isn't it? But particularly in this kind of situation. So that's what I would say really for the contraindications.
Okay, fabulous. Well, this has been really great. Just talking about how to support kids, what to look for, a little bit of the process of grief, and then the tools of grounding, watching our language, using invitational language, checking in with ourselves to see that we're handling things the best that we can, and being really real and honest with children in a responsive, compassionate way.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great summary.
All right. Where can people find you if they want to follow up with you, or where are some resources that they might find more on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So my website is yogawithsally.co.uk. I'm on Facebook as Yoga with Sally as well. And in terms of resources, you know, I really want to signpost, because there are some fantastic information sources and resources out there, particularly through charities. So in the UK, we have a charity called Winston's Wish. And I'm sure some of those resources will be available online, and they've got some really nice practical activities about, you know, for example, making a beaded bracelet, making a wish jar. So that's a really, really fantastic resource as well. And in terms of other helpful organisations, I mean, there's tons. Bereavement support for young people, there's Child Bereavement UK, there's Childline, but I definitely think Winston's Wish is the main one I would signpost people to at this point. Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you. I don't know Winston's Wish, so I'm going to go check it out for sure.
Oh, there you go.
So thank you very much. Well, it's been a delight to chat with you today, and thank you so much. We've coordinated time zones and done this whole thing, and you know, I'm in Canada and you're in England, and I love technology that allows us to do this.
Absolutely, yeah, and it was all very seamless and easy, wasn't it? I mean,
it was. It worked.
Yeah,
when it works, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, and I wish you all the best.
So you're so welcome. Thank you so much, Donna. Thank you.
And to all of our community out there, those who are watching, those who are listening, thank you for your time and for your attention. If someone you know has come to mind while you've been listening to this episode, please pass it along to them and share the amazing information that Sally has shared with us today. And we always appreciate support of the podcast through a rating, review, or a donation. This is a labor of love, and I love doing it. But it is, there are costs involved. And so anything that you can do to help promote the show, whether it's through sharing in the community or through donation, you know, my heart, thank you very, very much. So this has been the Yoga in My School podcast. My name is Donna Freeman. Namaste.